So I'd like to start this video off with a trigger warning because I know some people might actually be triggered by this. I'd just like to say if you watch this and you feel like you're being attacked, or if you feel this is about you, it's not. It's in your mind. If you're getting angry by some of the things I'm saying, I can't help it. This is my own personal market analysis of the retic industry as it stands today. And if anybody who disagrees, doesn't like it, feel free to comment, offer up their own opinion, or make their own video, but it's not an attack on anybody. So that's the trigger warning, and I don't want to have to hear about how I'm being mean to people. So I'm going to start out with a question. Is the mainland market crashing, and what does that mean for retics? Well, the short answer is yes and no. Yes, it is, and yes, it isn't. The economy has basically crashed because of the inflation created by all the money printed during COVID. And retics were already on the path to restabilizing from the ROR hype that I warned about back in like 2016, 2017. I said all this was gonna happen. I saw that coming years before it happened. Just a simple understanding of basic economics, and you could have seen it coming a mile away. SD prices had to come down, and as a result, mainland prices had to drop too. And let's face it, a Superdorf is a better pet than a mainland. When there is a better product on the market, the other products naturally come down in price. Now, there's a few situations where this doesn't happen. Ternates, Halmas, Mindanaus, Solas, they are all examples that weren't impacted by the ROR hype bubble or the COVID money inflation, simply because they were never overpriced and they were never overproduced. Because of that, their value was never tied to inflation, and their potential value was never inflated by promises of earning a massive amount of money in the future when people bred them. That was pretty much specifically only occurring in 7 specific localities that inflated idea of potential earnings, which we know what 7 they are. Nor were the ones I just mentioned ever in any way really connected to the mainland morph combo market. That makes a big deal too, and why their prices were never affected. Malaysians, Balis, and Sumatrans are in the same, those other 4 localities, but they haven't really been produced in a while, but they will have stable prices as well, guaranteed. Looking at the retic industry as 3 separate markets, the ROR7, the mainland combos, and the other pure localities, gives a clear picture as to why prices are what they are. There are 3 different economies within the retic industry itself, with obviously Superdorfs being the best product of all 3. But only one of those markets doesn't suffer from overproduction or price stabilization, which is causing a drop in price, which was caused by price gouging of 7 localities. Now, I'm not saying run out and buy Ternates, Mindanaus, Halmas, Sulawesi's, Balis, Malaysians, or Sumatrans, because there's hardly any available of any of them right now anyways. I'm just breaking down the retic industry into its 3 parts so there's a clear understanding of why the prices on morph market are what they are. Ocelots went from $12K to being sold behind doors for $2 to $3K. There's just not that many people that can afford a $12,000 retic. As more and more of them get produced, the price has to come down to meet the market demands at the prices the market's willing to pay. It also doesn't help that a lot of the newer ocelots getting produced are looking worse than the old ocelots, because all the Javan and Sumatran blood that was in the original double het that got imported is being bred out and replaced by all the watered down polygenic traits in the morph combos they're getting bred into. On the Superdorf side, you'll probably see Karampas start to drop price as well. It won't take very many clutches of them to drop down to around Kalatoa prices. Medus will probably hold price better than Karampas. Medus are actually rarer than Karampas. If you don't believe me, count the number of Medu clutches in the last 10 years versus the amount of Karampa clutches in the last 10 years. Point being, prices are determined on the scale of supply and demand. The average between those two are the prices that people are willing to pay. Sometimes a good sales pitch can tip the scales in one direction and increase prices, but those price increases are only temporary, and the scale must move back to the other direction and the prices stabilize. That's what's happening now in Superdorfs, and with them being technically a better product than mainland and dwarfs, the self-correcting scale of commerce is driving down prices on pretty much everything, with only exception of a handful of localities that were insulated from the cold price plunge by low production and setting reasonable starting prices years ago. In Superdorfs, the TK line has probably lost the most value of anything we've seen in that specific market. But nothing drives down prices quite like overhype, exaggeration of scarcity, an origin story that's constantly changing, and a few assault and battery charges, which is sad because TK line Superdorfs are great, especially when you use them to breed in the morphs. A while ago in a video, I predicted that mainland prices on a lot of mainlands would actually drop so low that it would make sense to keep producing them. And we are getting close to that. Not with all mainlands, but with the single gene mainland stuff that's been around for a long time and it's already 300 or sub 300. I saw this happen like 20 years ago with albino berms. Albino berms dropped down to like around like $50. They weren't even worth producing for a very long time. You're seeing the same thing happen in real time with ball pythons. And it's not just single genes with them. It's great looking morph combos. This video is an attack on mainland, ROR, or anybody else who feels like they're being attacked. This video is an assessment of the retic industry as it stands today. The fact that my production has held its prices and values despite people trying to destroy it both publicly and privately, while said actions were supported by a lot of people, just goes to show that market analysis is more important than production itself. Had I fallen into the misguided mindset of overproduction, overhype, overpricing, while simultaneously actively trying to overproduce other people's animals and projects, or to give snakes to people to get them to try to overproduce other people's animals and projects, I would be in the same bad situation as some of these breeders that are watching their products lose value daily. These are the types of actions to be avoided by new breeders. Right now on Morph Market, mainland prices are coming down, while some breeders are trying to hold prices up high. Two examples are a het ocelot I saw in there for I think $1,500, and then there was a triple het on there for around $4,000. Now, people can price their snakes at whatever they want. It's a free market. That's not what this is about. In this current market, is there any reason to think either one of those snakes will sell at those prices? For $3K, you can just go out and get an ocelot. For $4,000, you can go out and get visual examples of all the things that triple het is het for. Triple hets have a 1 in 64 odds of hitting the triple visual. With prices coming down, who's going to make a $4,000 bet with 1 in 64 odds? People don't even like the 1 in 16 odds on double hets. Mainland triple hets are not seen as a long-term investment, which is exactly what they are. If we're being honest, it is a long-term investment because you know, to get this stuff, you have to put in the time and the years and to do these breedings. But the people, I try selling double hets. It's hard as hell. Triple hets are even harder. They're just viewed by most people as a bad bet because of your odds. But this also means people aren't viewing most mainland projects as a viable long-term investment. And what that means is it moves mainland retics into the pet category. The problem is that some Superdorf projects have dropped so low in price that they are also into that price pet point and no longer in that investment category. So now mainlands are in direct competition with Superdorfs. This has never happened before. And I know some people are going to hear this and be like, no, it's always happened because there's always been Superdorfs and there's been mainlands. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's never been a time really in retics where a pet level mainland and a pet level Superdorf were basically in the same competing space because of how Superdorfs had never been really produced enough to get down to that level of, okay, these are pets. These aren't really breeder investment production. That's what I'm saying, just for clarification. Yeah, so mainland breeders are now not only competing with other mainland breeders, but for the first time, they literally are directly competing with Superdorf breeders because of the market and where prices are stabilizing. This is a crushing blow to the mainland market, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. It is. I warned about this years ago. You know, and to be honest, a 50% Superdorf whatever versus the mainland counterpart really isn't an actual competition for a sale if the price is close enough. The only option now is for the mainland price to be so low that the Superdorf price can't actually compete. But this is going to be really hard for that to happen now because some of the single gene codom Superdorf stuff is actually coming down to that sub 750 level, and some of it's hitting that 500 and soon to be sub 500 on some stuff. Yeah, and this will also drive down the prices of 50% dwarfs as well. It's not just going to affect the mainlands. I mean, it's going to drop dwarf prices as well. But the point being, when this happens, now you're in a situation where for that mainland price to be super low, so it can actually beat out the, we'll call it the size benefit of the super dwarf. Once we're getting into the sub 500, what are we really looking at? And if it hits 350, now we're sub 100 on the mainland version. So try to answer this question. If a 50% super dwarf platy is $300, how much is a 50% dwarf platy and how much is a platy mainland? Try to put number values on those. I guess there's really not a right or wrong answer here, but because eventually a super dwarf platy will be $300 at 50%. Okay, so how much is the Jamp version and how much is the mainland version? Even if you just shave off 30% for each one, let's say this, if the super dwarf version is 300, say the Jamp version is 200, what's really the mainland version? 100 if you're lucky. What's the selling point at that point? What are you offering at that point? Platy, Tiger, GC, Sunfire, Motley is in a position where these genes could get pushed so low by super dwarf productions of those same genes that it won't be financially reasonable to even produce them anymore in mainland. 20 years ago when Burmese pythons hit $50, it was because of overproduction. Albino berms didn't have albino super dwarf berms also pushing down prices. Mainland retics, like berms, also have an overproduction issue. But they also have the added pressure of COVID money inflation and super dwarf prices stabilizing. This has the potential to push single gene mainlands and some combos into the sub 100 price range. And I'm not talking about behind closed doors. I'm talking about publicly being sold for that on Morph Market. And once snakes get that low, people don't want to pay $50 for shipping for a $75 snake. So it essentially will just kill the online sales of mainland. So what does all this mean? Well, for dwarf and super dwarf breeders focused on selective breeding, it means it's time to start buying up cheap mainlands to start projects that you've been wanting to start. It's time to start these long-term projects. $2,500 right now goes a very long way in the mainland retic market. Start buying when you see good deals. If you already have your dwarfs and super dwarfs, you can start new projects dirt cheap. Just because the mainland market is crashing and super dwarf prices are coming down, it doesn't mean the whole of the retic industry is crashing. Prices are stabilizing. The market is correcting. This is what happens in all industries, and a lot of people will get out because of it. The market was destabilized by hype and COVID money. And it wasn't just retics. That was across the board. Like when Dumeral's boas shot up to like $750 or something insane like that, and I had been for a few years I'd been wholesaling them at $65 a piece. But this is the same crash you saw in across the board in species, like white lips that happened. Timors went through the roof in price. They've come back down, which Timors are great. I don't know why more people aren't working with them. They're anybody who's into retics should probably be into Timors. But there's a lot of stuff like that. Scrubs got hyped up. Class Olympus went through the roof. But a lot of people that bought into retics because of inflated hype and COVID money, they're going to get out. And a lot of them already have. And a lot of them will leave because now those two things are gone, the hype and the COVID money. Similarly, mainland breeders are going to have to make a similar choice. Stay in mainlands and sell retics for $50 to $150 each, or do something different. I'm not saying all mainlands will be $50 to $150. I'm saying mainlands, namely mainland morphs, single genes, whose super dwarf counterparts are sub $500, those animals will get pushed down to that $50 to $150 price point. No one's paying $250 for a mainland platy if they can get a really nice super dwarf platy for $350, especially if that super dwarf platy was made by breeding a platy ternate to a super dwarf. The mainland will not be able to compete on both color and size. So regardless of what the prices are doing, breeders that are pushing for selective breeding will make retics that look good and sell. And that's the big takeaway from this. And that's the only thing you really need to take into consideration moving forward with your production is, one, accepting the fact that prices have to come down because they were hyped up artificially through in some cases scarcity, in some cases exaggerated scarcity. And on the mainland side, because the mainland market has always been just basically a microcosm of the ball python market, which has been gene stacking, morph combos, that always has this kind of, I don't want to say pyramid scheme, but it always ends up the same way. When the market is based around gene stacking, it's almost a race to the finish, and you're dealing in such high production numbers with retics that it doesn't take very long. And on the ball python market, there's so many more morphs, so many more potential morph combos. The retics just don't have that. So mainland retics are always find themselves in this position of a continual, almost a continual loss in value. And it typically slows down once the production produces something that people feel is aesthetically pleasing enough to kind of balance out the price. That's why things like purples have held price for so long. They held price for a very long time. So some of this stuff will hold prices, but the thing that will ultimately push them down is when the super dwarf version, the 50% at least super dwarf version, starts to creep down and starts to push on that mainland market. And we're already seeing that. You can see it. You can look at it right now on Morph Market. There's no reason to think that the better product will just be the same price as the mainland. And whether anybody wants to admit it or not, the 50% version, super dwarf version of whatever mainland morph is still better than the mainland morph, because it's not going to get as big. It's not going to cost near as much to feed. It's not going to have the requirements that the mainland animal has. So there's no reason for them to be the same price. Whenever a new product comes on the market, if it's better than the current products, those current products lose value by necessity. That's why I need people to understand here, I'm not attacking mainlands. I'm pointing out how a market works. New product equals old products that aren't as good losing value. Just how it works. So I do think the mainland market on a lot of stuff is kind of in a tailspin, and they're all just kind of racing to the bottom. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to cause problems by saying this, but I do also see these low prices as an opportunity for the dwarf and super dwarf breeders to start snagging up some of these dirt cheap mainland morphs that they can start a new project with. Because the reality is the mainland people aren't going to do it. And if they do, they're just going to breed everything to golden child, because that's what they do. They just breed like everything to gold. I don't know why, but whatever. So take the opportunity, get some mainland stuff. It's dirt cheap right now. I've been buying up stuff. Some other breeders I know have been buying up stuff. We've been getting stuff really cheap, and it's going to allow us to start these new projects that, for the most part, aren't even being done yet in super dwarfs. And some of these projects that we're lining up in dwarf and super dwarfs haven't even been done in mainlands yet. Don't wait. If you wanted to start whatever project and you see that mainland version for $200, chances are they'll take $150. Go get it. Go start your project.